Now, it's my incredible pleasure. This is the first time I've ever introduced this gentleman, but he was awarded 3 Purple Hearts and a Bronze Star in Vietnam. Right now, one of the steering committee members of Vietnam Veterans Against War, and the national president of Veterans for Peace, Dave Cline.
Something important is showing up. Well, let me start by saying I had a rough night last night. So I'm going to do the best I can. You know, I came into the peace movement the hard way, through the combat zone, you know. Because when I was a young man, I was drafted into the Army in Central Vietnam. And I went over there wanting to believe our government's doing the right thing. And as soon as I got over there, they told us, forget everything they told you over in the United States. You can't trust none of these people. They're not really people. They're goops. You know, this is about staying alive. And I did the best I could to stay alive. I got wounded 3 times in the war. And came back. I got medevaced out actually after only 6 months. You know, I figured when the Viet Cong seen me, they said, look at that big white boy. Let's shoot him. You know. And when I came back, I felt I had a responsibility to start telling people the truth about what was happening, what our young men and women were being sent to do. And I wasn't even looking at it from the point of view of a political thing. I was looking at it from the point of view that my brother, my buddies from high school were going to be going in, and they were drafting back in them days. Now that's a little bit different than today, but it was still what got me going to it. And over the years, I've been involved in the veterans movement for many activities. I've worked with homeless veterans, I've worked with post-traumatic stress, I've worked with memorial efforts, I opposed the war in Central America, I opposed the war in the first Persian Gulf War, and now we're back into the same cycle again. So I'm coming here as a veteran of the Veterans Peace Movement. And one of the things I've learned is that in doing this is I've learned to study the history of our movements. And see, now veterans have always, after a war, had to come back in this country and fight for their rights. You know, this country has, and it may be true of every country, really. It may be true of every country, because when you go to war, you're not fighting for yourself, you're fighting for someone else, usually for rich people. And when you come back, you're the leftover. You know, like we like to say about veterans, they're like a condom, you use it once and throw away. And so the history of this country, as an American, I've studied my country a little bit, and the history of this country going back to the beginning is one of veterans standing up for their rights. Shays' Rebellion was a veterans movement, you know. The Bonus March. The Bonus March was an effort by the people to get some help during the Depression. But let's also remember the Ku Klux Klan was a veterans movement. You know, there's nothing that makes a veterans movement inherently progressive. A veterans movement could be a progressive movement or a fascistic movement. Smedley Butler, who many of us respected as one of the great leaders, they attempted to recruit him during the 30s for a fascistic coup d'etat against Roosevelt. Big business tried to do that. So we always have to keep clear in our mind who we are and what we're fighting for. I think this is really significant because it's easy to get into the veterans movement and not what kind of veterans movement. Now, for a long time in the social justice and peace movements, being involved in it, I've had a problem for a long time with the social justice and peace movements because people always say money for human needs, not for war. But when they start making the laundry list of what the human needs are, for many years I never saw veterans issues ever listed. You know, I'm a president of Veterans for Peace. I've been a Vietnam veteran against the war for years. And one of the things I learned is when the shit gets heavy, where they're calling you unpatriotic, they love to get a veteran up in front. You know what I mean? Because it's a lot harder to criticize you. And I don't mind running cover for anybody. That's being a point man. But being a point man means that you're part of the crew. And you have to be listened to at the table and treated justly at the table. So that's what I'm saying here right now, is if with the Iraq veterans, who are the new kids on the block, the baddest boys in town and women, baddest girls in town too, you know, that we can't just let ourselves be put into a position of being window dressing for the peace movement. So I would encourage the Iraq vets, and I know you guys are going to probably talk about this sometime today, to not let this thing go in the wrong direction. The veterans movement has historically had a practice of turning on themselves, not only the veterans movement, but I can tell you from my experience, of getting into fights with each other, and the next thing you know, we're cutting each other's throats instead of going after the people we should be going after. And I think that that's an issue that we've confronted today, because a provocation was put out when a person would go to a right-wing email listserv or news service or whatever it is, and make statements saying that we shouldn't be here, that we're wrong and insensitive. I think we have to respond, but we have to respond in a thoughtful and a progressive and a unifying way. So I would urge my brothers and sisters from Iraq vets to, in dealing with this, not get themselves too pumped up, because, you know, like we used to say, young, dumb, and full of cum, you know. And it's easy to get mad and to throw down. It's easy to get mad and to throw down, but we aren't going to gain anything by throwing down against fellow veterans or people in the movement unless we really determine that they're our enemies. So let me just say in conclusion, I think today was another step in a great movement in this country. We're on the move, you know, and a movement's growing. And I can think back to a year ago when I wasn't here last year, but I can think back to a year ago, the first anniversary, and there was no such a thing as Iraq Vets Against the War. There was no group of guys up in the banner, handing out literature, wearing their camis, any of that, you know. There was no Gold Star Families for Peace. There was Gold Star Families. There's been Gold Star Families since the minute the bullets started flying. But there was no Gold Star Families for Peace. So what I see is a movement that's growing. And the only way a movement's going to keep growing is keep organizing. Keep in the streets. Don't give up. Keep struggling. If you don't struggle, you don't win. Without struggle, there is no progress. Power has conceded nothing without a struggle. It never has and it never will. Those who want progress without struggle are those who want crops without sowing the seeds. So let's struggle. Thank you.